A while back I made a restoration only run on Oblivion and it's gotten some decent views. For a channel with less than 300 subscribers, I'll take what I can get. This time around, someone recommended another challenge run, but this time only using restoration on max difficulty and forced leveling. However, since we've already done a restoration only video, I figured we could try something else while still incorporating the same limitations. Today's challenge is, can you beat Oblivion without killing anything? And with killing comes damage. To make it that one step harder, we're also implementing no damage done either, while on max difficulty and leveling up whenever possible, through whatever means necessary, as you'll see later. For this run, since I have to beat the game without killing anything, including quest-specific NPCs, I'm allowing the use of exploits, but not in the sense that I can just run to the Imperial City and beat the game in 3 minutes, as that would be no fun at all. And as you'll see in the video, others will be used. Leave a comment below if you think I can accomplish this and let me know at the end if you were right or not. Without further ado, let's begin. Before I even got into the character creator, I immediately had flashbacks of Patrick Stewart sitting in a dark room talking ominously off camera. I didn't want to revisit the restoration only run days, so I skipped the cutscene and went straight into making my abomination of a character. I went with Breton this time round because I figured if I was going to go for a no kill no damage run, then having a boost to my restoration skills straight from the get-go would be the best way to start. After spending what felt like forever making my dream OC, I was finally able to walk around my cell. I got insulted by my cell neighbor and tried to show him what's what by punching the air. He didn't know I was going for a no damage run, and so I was trying to keep up an act to show the rest of the cellmates who was in charge. The usual trio rode up to my cell and told me to step away because there was a secret entrance in the underground nightclub behind me. But being the omniscient entity that I am, I stood my ground and threw out a couple of punches to show them that I wasn't being bossed around this time. However, they called my bluff enough times and eventually I let them in to open the secret passageway to continue the run. We continued through the ominous walkways until we got to the inevitable part of departure. A fork in the road, separation anxiety mixed with fear and ankle-biting ferocity of the rats just on the other side of the wall. I knew they were there, but I didn't think that max difficulty rats would be that big of an issue. I couldn't have been more wrong. See, my thought process for getting out of this tutorial, seeing how you don't actually have to kill anything, was just spamming the heal self spell that the game gives you at the start. What I didn't anticipate was the fact that these two rats attacking you at the same time had your health depleting faster than my bank account on a Friday night. I couldn't heal through the damage that was being dealt, so I tried putting armor on to soften the blows. That did virtually nothing. I tried hopping around pillars thinking that if I was in the air constantly they wouldn't be able to reach me. Except when I went into the air, the rats turned into elites with energy swords from Halo 2 on legendary difficulty. There was no escape. The only way I got through this was by sheer luck and memorizing the shortest path to get to the next room while exploiting some of the AI tracking by jumping around ledges and corners. Normally I wouldn't go through this much detail to explain the tutorial to Oblivion, as everyone's already probably done so, but considering I'm only dealing with rats at this point, this is to show that max difficulty and a no kill no hostility run is gonna require some perseverance on my end. After finally escaping the hellhole that I had found myself in, I reunited with the homies and Captain Picard asked what my zodiac was. I went with the Mage's Constellation as I figured I'd be casting mainly spells for this run so extra magicka wouldn't hurt. I walked with Charles Xavier to the usual departure zone, and after he handed me his friendship necklace, he was cut down. I didn't have any time to grieve because after the assassin cut him down, he chased me, and if Boris hadn't been there, I would have been murdered for sure. But this isn't the first time that an NPC will save me. Boris asked me why he didn't receive the friendship necklace, and then asked what type of class I wanted to be. I picked the only good choice being custom and went with willpower for extra magic regeneration and endurance for health. And just when I thought I was making a good class, I messed up. Honestly, at this point, you could just make a custom class with anything and get away with it. As long as you don't put any stats into attacking things like destruction or bows or things like that, you can make this work. Because ideally you want to finish the game with as low a level as possible since everything scales to you, and this being max difficulty, we die in 1 to 2 hits anyway later on. And while writing this script and rewatching the choices I made, you could blind yourself and pick better choices than I did. Boris commended me on my choices, which he definitely should have because they were bad, and then set me free into the sewers, where I ran straight to the door and finally emerged into the world of Cyrodiil. And after a little over an hour in the tutorial, the run could officially begin. Yes, hands down, this was the longest tutorial run I've ever done. So right out of the gate, I teleported to Wayne Priory and ran inside to tell Joffrey that Patrick Stewart had been assassinated, and I needed to go find Boromir before he was shot by alerts. Joffrey quickly spilled the beans on his location as nobody wants to relive that moment again. So I was off to Kvatch. When I got there, Deathclock was already putting on a concert and a gate to Oblivion had spawned. I got in touch with the local authorities and they said that the only way I was going to get into the town was if I closed this here gate. Not quite sure how I was going to do that as I wasn't able to kill anyone, but I was willing to give it a go. Once inside, I was greeted by a Sean Bean stunt double fighting off some scamps. Sometimes he would do a good job at killing them and sometimes he wouldn't. One of the best things about max difficulty is not only does it bump up the enemies, but it also bumps up the NPCs as well. But some NPCs still hit like wet noodles. After making a save where he finally still alive after killing the scamps, we were able to progress through Oblivion. Unfortunately, because the AI decides it wants to fight everything in proximity, the NPC never made it to the actual door to get inside to close the Oblivion gate. However, I didn't fare much better either. See, even though I was able to dodge most of the fireballs being thrown out by the scamps, eventually I would come to a door where a Daedra would spawn every time I got there. The first hit would be draining almost all of my health, and the second mace attack would kill me. This was the first major obstacle I ran into. The enemies did so much damage that I couldn't heal through it, and because of the fact that I was seen by enemies in previous rooms, that guard always showed up. There was no RNG to this at all, and a guarantee that I would meet this bouncer every time, and he would promptly kick me to the curb. I tried all sorts of things. I tried running around the area hoping that with my acrobatic skills so high I could jump over a wall. I even tried to do an item jumping technique which would allow me to get higher up, but I just couldn't actually get it. If I was going to do this, I was going to have to get better gear. There was no way I was going to be able to do this at this time, so it was back to town to learn the ropes of pacifism. I traveled to Bravo and started running around trying to find ways to scrounge up money to buy gear and better things. The only problem was I could have saved so much time if I knew the knowledge I know now, but we'll get into that later. I went to the Mages Guild and bought alchemy equipment and started making tons and tons and tons of potions, hoping to be able to sell the potions at a high price and buy ingredients at a low price and repeat the cycle for infinite money. But after about 20 minutes, I realized that this just wasn't going to work. Honest work is long and hard, and in a run like this, we gotta use some exploits. I joined the Mages Guild and then immediately went and stole every expensive book I could find from upstairs while no one was looking, went back downstairs and sold it all back to them, then bought rage spells. I don't know why this type of spell exists in this game, but I'm not complaining. For anyone who hasn't played Oblivion, basically what the Rage or Frenzy spells do is they max out an NPC's aggression, and then they just start attacking whatever the closest thing is. However, it doesn't count as an assault and doesn't do damage. So not only am I not killing anyone when they go off and murder people because I didn't do it, but it's also not seen as a bad action. This would be one of the most important tools in this run. The second and third most important tools of this run would be the Duplication Glitch and one invisibility potion. The Duplication Glitch is so easy to perform, I don't know why everyone just doesn't use it. I must have been the only person to not know how to do it. Essentially what you do is you need to have 2 scrolls of the exact same properties, which is easy given the fact that in the Imperial City you could buy 2 of the exact same scroll from a merchant. Now that you have the 2 scrolls, what you do is you select the scroll to equip it, then drop the item that you want to duplicate. From what I saw, it only works if you have 1 of the item, but let's just say you have 111 scrolls, all of the same properties and value. When you drop that one thing, whatever it is, being a potion, an armor piece, or a weapon, it's going to drop 111 copies of that thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I present you infinite items and infinite money. I bought the most expensive magical armor that I could from a merchant, duped it, and then sold it back to him at a very, very slow rate. But never had to worry about money ever again for the rest of the run, and I consider that a win-win. Now that preparations were finally out of the way, it was back to the Oblivion Gate. I made a bajillion invisibility potions and proceeded to waltz right through. The only thing I will say about invisibility potions is, even though the one I had a longer timer on it, invisibility goes away when you literally do anything. If you activate a door, a switch, if you attack something, if you look at something the wrong way, it goes away. But due to how many I had, I didn't have to be stingy with using them. So anytime that I went to a door I could activate, I activated the door, tabbed into the inventory, applied another invisibility potion, and went into the room cloaked. And since I had no fear of running out, I quickly got all the way to the sigil key holder, and then the next challenge presented itself. Frenzy doesn't work on Daedra, so I couldn't get him to attack his allies, and I couldn't pick the key off him. Luckily, there's a fault just below where he's standing that overlooks spikes, and after a couple moments of baiting him to the edge, I finally got him to fall in the spikes, and all without giving me an assault or murder point. I collected the key and continued on my way. From there, I deactivated the Oblivion Gate and got placed outside. The only downside was I still had to go get Boromir out of Kvatch, which meant I had to continue with the guards into the castle gates and clear out the courtyard. I got a little worried after the first 3 guards bit the dust so quick. I didn't expect to see clan fears here this early. I tried to convince Sean Bean to leave the safety of his chapel and come back with me to Joffrey, but he said I had to stick with the guards and make sure it was clear first. Typical good guy syndrome. I kinda thought I was doomed here, except for the fact that one of the guards in particular, Salavan, pulled through, and because he can't be killed, eventually, and I do mean eventually because this took a while of watching him get beat to death over and over, he pulled through by clearing the hostiles, and I finally left with Sean Bean back to Wayne and Priory just as it was being attacked. I set Sean Bean loose to defend me, and I'll be damned, I would not want to get in this guy's way. He only had a dagger, but that dagger must have been a gift from Todd Howard himself because he was decimating all these people. We met back up with Joffrey and quickly double-checked for the Amulet of Kings, and this jerk had lost my friendship necklace. I could hear Patrick rolling in his grave already. Joffrey decided there was no point hanging around here, so he took us to his gang's hideout and recruited both Sean and I. Sean, being the savior of the universe, gave his speech congratulating him and I on being the newest gang members to the Blades. After the speech, Joffrey let me know that Boris was in town and needed to talk with me on getting info on the cult that was spawning these Oblivion Gates. It was time to do some investigating. I met up with Boris, who asked me to help him throw a surprise party for a friend of his. I followed them into a basement, and when we sprung the surprise, Boris's friend collapsed from all the excitement. After the party was over, I searched through some of the pockets, and Boris spilled the beans on a cult he was tracking. Turns out, his friend just so happened to be a member of said cult. Not only were these the same guys that killed Patrick Stewart, but their mission was to resurrect Sukuna and bring down the end of days. Boris told me of a bipedal iguana that would have more answers, but upon seeking out the scaly wizard, all he did was give me a list of books to collect. Supposedly they were needed to complete an arc in a manga he was reading, and no more info would be given until I got them. Luckily for me, I already had 2, and the third was sitting at a nearby bookshop, but on the way to the shop, I got distracted and began casting Frenzy on some nearby townsfolk. Frenzy is straight up insane. Not only do I get to loot the body when the person inflicted dies, but I also get to watch the biggest cluster truck of combat when cast. I finally made my way to the bookstore, but the owner told me the manga I was chasing was reserved for someone else. However, after a while of joke telling and compliments, he sold the book to me. 3 down, 1 more to go. The quest updated, but still said I needed to go talk with the person who pre-ordered it. I figured I could just cast Frenzy and have him die and the quest could proceed, but this didn't work. Frenzy usually makes the victim super aggressive, but in some very rare cases, it makes the victim flee instead. I chased Gwynnis all through the Imperial City trying to get him to talk, and he tried to snitch to some local guards. But because the game didn't register that I was the one who did anything wrong, Gwynnis just started dancing, and it felt rude not to join in. but after a while I realized I needed to lay low and let this whole thing blow over. I went through a low door, waited an entire day, and then chased Gwyneth down to get the info I needed.
I'm still very angry at Phintius.
He told me the only way to get the final battle in the manga was to organize a meeting with some of the executive producers. Boris was pleased by this as he had been trying to meet with these guys for a while, but if I wanted to find the location, I'd have to follow him through the sewers. Boris led me through a horde of Mr. Krabs' offspring trying to empty our pockets, but he chopped them to bits. We made it to the meeting spot and I let him do the talking, but sabotaged our mission by standing out in the open and getting us all killed. I tried again, but didn't fare much better this time around. It wasn't until the third attempt I remembered I could cast Frenzy and have the cult members attack each other. I wasn't able to save Boris, but I got what I came for and left quickly. Traveled back to the Iguana, waited 3 days for him to read his manga, and once finished he finally gave me the rundown and sent me on a quest to find a map hidden in plain sight. I waited around for an eternity to get my map and then went to infiltrate the rival gang's headquarters. All was going pretty smooth as they let me right in and gave me a matching bathrobe, but they did take my stuff. It didn't seem all that bad, but trust me, it was way worse than I thought. I traveled further and ended up at some guy doing some slam poetry. He opened up a portal and then blinked out of existence. Now all I had to do was steal his diary and I could leave. I tried Frenzy and I turned the room into a free-for-all, but sadly I was one of the first to go. I tried fulfilling some ritual, but since it required me to kill someone, I declined and instead became the sacrifice. I even tried to steal the book and make a run for it, but was shot in the back. I tried all sorts of things, but the result was always the same. If I wanted out, I was gonna have to think ahead. I reloaded to save and duped some invisibility potions, dropped all my valuable armor, and proceeded back to the indoctrination. This time, armed with invisibility potions, I turned the entire room in on themselves as watched as the spells got cast, the maces smacked into flesh, and soon I was one of the only few standing. What was even better was the fact that the prisoner who was going to be sacrificed could be released. This guy on max difficulty was able to single-handedly clear the way for me to run out of here, and even gave me a level up along the way. It was a smooth walk to the entrance after my nap, and I quickly reported back to Joffrey and Boromir to tell them my findings. They were impressed, but said that they had spies trying to hunt down the manga, which I had rightfully claimed for the bipedal iguana. But if this is what they wanted, I would make sure they would leave him alone and never return. To make finding the spies easier, I went and spoke to the captain of the guard, Bird, in Bruma. He told me of some sketchy characters hanging out at a nearby house, and I went to investigate. I lockpicked my way inside and found that they had a hidden trapdoor. I spent all my lockpicks trying to open the trapdoor, then decided that the best thing to do would be wait for them to arrive. I waited outside like the madman I was in the same spot for 7 hours, but luck would have it, the spy did in fact return. I went inside to greet her, but she used a transformation jutsu and chased me outside. However, instead of going to attack me, she started attacking the nearby NPCs? Which, I mean, I'm completely okay with. But upon seeing her winning her nearest assault, I put Frenzy on her, which made her attack even more of the town. Soon the entire guard was attacking this spy, and wouldn't you know it, they put her down faster than I thought possible. Step 1 was complete. Before I even had a chance to gather my thoughts, I saw a beggar checking through the pockets of the recently deceased. I wasn't going to stand for that, so I cast Frenzy on him and had him start attacking people. But luck was on my side, because the quest updated again. This beggar was in fact the second spy. I couldn't believe my luck. After ransacking the 2 bodies, I found the basement key and decided to see what was on the other side of my wasted lockpicks. I found another diary down there and quickly ran back to Boromir to report my findings. Boromir was pleased, but then said my quest was far from over. See, he found that the leader of the rival gang, Mankar Cameron, possessed my friendship necklace, and to fulfill my quest, I'd have to slay him and retrieve it. However, since he lived in his own pocket dimension, I would need a list of items to create a one-way portal in to stop him. The first item on the list was a Daedric Artifact. Now, there are a ton of artifacts in Oblivion that you can go get, some of which require you to be way higher level than I was at this point. But the easiest to obtain was the Azura Star Artifact. And luckily, Boromir had a book on the table that gave me the exact whereabouts of where to go to get this thing. But not having the ability to kill someone was going to make this a tougher challenge than I had imagined. See, the thing with this particular artifact is you have to offer up glow dust to even commune with the Daedric entity. Now, normally what that means is you just kill the will-o-wisp that's at the shrine, take the glow dust, make the offering, and you're on your way. But I tried to get one of the NPCs to fight the will-o-wisp, and on max difficulty, the will-o-wisp seemed damn near unkillable, and the NPC went unconscious more times than I could count. Luckily, it is a common ingredient that you can buy from alchemists, and with the duplication technique on my side, I was able to soon commune with the deity. The issue originally was going to be getting the glowstone, which proved to be way easier than I thought. The real issue with this quest was the fact that I had to go to a cave and clear out 4 vampires on max difficulty that could all kill me in 1 to 2 shots. To the gutted mines I went. There was an Oblivion gate that had spawned outside, and at first I thought it was just be something that I could pass by. I didn't realize how important this Oblivion gate would come to be. See, the Frenzy spell maxes out aggression and has NPCs attack one another. That's fine. The issue is at this point, I didn't realize that armor played such a major role in casting spells, being the more armor you wore, the less effective your spell was. So effectively what I was doing was casting Frenzy, immediately downing an invisibility potion, and praying to Todd Howard himself that these guys would fight each other. Sometimes they'd take a couple swings, sometimes they wouldn't. It took me nearly 40 minutes to dwindle their numbers. That's almost 10 minutes a person just to get down to the final guy, and then I realized I didn't have anyone else to fight him in these caves. But I did have other things to fight them outside. Sure enough, I lured that vampire to the Oblivion gate and had the scamps do my dirty work. The best part about it was the fact that once the scamps died, they would have respawned, meaning that I could have the vampire fight scamps to his heart's delight or until he died. Luckily, his death came first. After bringing back the star and talking with Joffrey, he convinced me that since I was so good at doing this hero thing, I should train a new batch of heroes and show them how to close Oblivion gates. I was off to Bruma to show Bert how to do the deed. I arrived, he gave a little pep talk to his group, and then moments after we stepped into the Oblivion gate, his men were slaughtered by scamps. Bird would have joined the fray too, except for the fact that him being an essential NPC, he could only be rendered unconscious. The only downside was since he couldn't die and his AI decided that he would fight every living thing in radius, that meant I watched him battle every single thing on our way from the gate to the main tower. It's not as bad as it sounds because with invisibility you can just hang out and you don't have to stress about anything, but after the 8th or 9th time that Bird went unconscious, it was getting a little boring. We finally made our way inside the tower and Bird went down again. He literally fought everything in our path, which in a way was actually perfect because that meant he could fight the Daedra with the sigil key this time around, and it would save us trying to lure them to an edge to knock them to their death. We grabbed the key, made our way to the final room, and I showed Bird how to hit the interact button on a descended stone, closing the gate and putting us back outside. Somewhere along the teleportation he had a time to do a costume change. Not quite sure what happened there, but little did I know one of the biggest obstacles in the game was right around the corner. An obstacle that would take me days of limited gaming to figure out. The potential run ender, Tiber Septim's armor in Sancor Tor. I didn't know it at first. I journeyed across the land, watched some archer guy fight off an enemy, and made my way into Sancor Tor. I drank an invisibility potion like any other mission, but then realized that I was in a mission that had 4 unique enemies that had to die for me to progress. An invisible wall with a damage over time effect was between me and my quest item, and Frenzy doesn't work on undead. Command does, but command will give you an assault, and if the thing under your command kills something, it counts as a kill for you, and I couldn't have either of those. It was time to do some research, and honestly, knowing what I know now, I could have saved myself an entire day of grief if I had known what I was about to do before doing it. But stick around, kids. I'm gonna blow your brains. Panic began to set in. I traveled to every mage's guild in the entire game to try and find spells that would assist me with what I was doing. The main issue I was running into was either they counted as assaults, they straight up killed people, or I didn't have near high enough skill to be able to cast them, since I was only like level 3 at this point. The money wasn't an issue, but I was running out of things to buy. I got so frustrated I took out my anger on some nearby citizens and just started casting Frenzy on every person I saw, hoping that somebody would die and they would drop the item that I needed to skip the dungeon. After looking around on the internet, I found something that I think would finally get me on the right track. See, I've played way more Skyrim than I have Oblivion, so much that I actually didn't know you could have followers in this game. Not in the sense of Skyrim, but at least having NPCs along for the ride with you during quests. Not only did I find this information out, but I also found a relatively easy one, being a Mage Guild quest that would have me rescuing a novice spellcaster. After reading the quest details, it was going to be a simple in-and-out job. Or so I thought. After picking up the quest from Adrian, all I had to do was go to a cave and find someone named Urthor. And until I returned, he would be an unkillable character. I arrived at the cave in question to grab my spellcaster and found that the cave was full of zombies. The only other enemy type that is unaffected by Frenzy. I made my way through the cave, downing a couple of invisibility potions, and found Urthor. Only problem was, he wouldn't leave until the cave had been cleared of all the undead. And if I cast Frenzy on him, he would go and attack until he took too much damage and then would flee from there on evermore. Even after going unconscious, he would wake up and then immediately flee again. There was no more combat. The fact that he could spawn enemies meant I needed him. So it was back to the drawing board to figure out how to get this man out of the cave while keeping my hands clean. Luckily, there was another NPC named Misoga who wasn't afraid of zombies and could help me get my spellcaster. I traveled to Leowin, and inside the main castle I met with the Count, and he told me that if I could remove the orc, he would pay me handsomely. Lucky for him, I didn't have any intentions of coming back once she left. I tried to chat up Misoga to get us out of there, but first she said I had to go talk to another bipedal iguana and organize a meeting between the two of them. A small amount of chump change later, and I realized I had a lizard and an orc talking inside a major castle. Afterwards, Misoga said that she would agree to accompany me as long as I took her to a lake she marked on the map. Long story short, she never would make it to that lake. I took my new orc friend all the way back to the cave of zombies and watched her as she cut them down. The only thing I could do to help was cast Turn Undead, causing them to flee, as Misoga is one of the few allies who follows you who can in fact die. After what I felt was an eternity, we finally freed Urthor and the main quest could finally continue. I was set! I had 2 NPCs that could accompany me for the rest of the game, and I wouldn't have to worry about killing anyone. I wouldn't have to worry about running away. I could save my infinite invisibility potions. I thought I was set. However, upon making it back to Sancre-Tor, I quickly found out that NPCs could not enter certain main quest areas. For whatever reason, Todd Howard in his infinite wisdom decided that this was a place that only the main character could enter. So after all that running around gathering my posse of homies, I couldn't even use them. It was back to the drawing board. And just when I thought the run was completely over, I stumbled upon a 1-minute, 23-second video that completely changed the game. A Twitch streamer by the name of Bubbles Del Fuego discovered a speedrunning technique that completed this entire dungeon in a little under a minute and a half using a technique called load warping. Basically what happens with a load warp is you make a save in front of a load door, any door that shows a loading screen during the transition. The next thing you do is when you go to open said door, push the interact button and escape at the same time. And if you've done it correctly, you'll hear the door make the open noise, but the save menu will come up instead. If this happens, load the quick save of your choice, and whichever quick save you've picked loads on the other side of the door. Meaning that I could drink skooma, pass out and make a quick save, and load onto the final door leading into the armor room, and using this method, appear on the other side of the kill wall, without having touched or killed a single enemy in this dungeon. The best part is, I could replicate it and get out as well. So after picking up the armor and load warping out, I was on my way to Boromir to show the rewards. I even got to bring the homies with me. The fellowship was coming together. After donning his new kicks, Sean Bean pointed me in the direction of the third item on the list, a great Welkin stone. A giant stone that would be able to charge the portal to enter the pocket dimension to fight the main bad guy to get my friendship necklace back. Off we went to Mizcaran to get the stone. This place was already better than Sanctor because of the fact that my posse could come with me inside. The only downside was the denizens of this place, being goblins, were already being cut down by zombies, and unfortunately my group didn't do too well against the undead. I ran through the entire place invisible, acted all the special switches, and made my way to the big stone itself, but just as happy as I was to see it, as soon as I picked it up, all the exits locked and a lich entered the room with a horde of undead. I was worried because liches are undead, which means frenzy isn't going to work, and being as I had no lockpicks, I couldn't pick my way out of the room. So with no other option being to reload a save by lockpicks and come back, I tried the load warp technique again. And wouldn't you know it, this works on anything! But I was only successfully able to pull it off in Sanctor. So after being cornered by undead, I literally jumped through space and time to another dungeon surrounded by more undead, drank some invisibility, and walked right out. The easiest heist so far. Now, if you're still with me by this point, I appreciate you, but spoilers, that's going to be the last load warp of the game. There are multiple other speedruns that involve load warping Oblivion gates to close them instantaneously, but because I didn't know about this technique until way later in the playthrough, it's not going to be a factor in this case. So for the rest of the game, we're kind of back to our normal hijinks and no more crazy teleportation. However, the game did kind of start to break down by this point. Because of the fact that I had NPCs that I had abandoned in this tomb of the undead, the game constantly rendered that I was near enemies, so fast travel became out of the question. So I had to run from Sanctor all the way back to the Blade's hideout on foot. If this is the worst kind of punishment that I'm expected to deal with, I consider this a slap on the wrist. When I did finally make it back to Sean Bean, he informed me that the last piece of the puzzle would be to let the rival gang put up one more Deathclock concert. Okay, pause the video for 2 seconds. So, when I write these scripts, I use speech to text because it's just easier to convey my thoughts that way. And being as I'm in Australia but speaking American English, sometimes the dictation comes up completely wrong. Like when I say the word comma, the program thinks that I'm saying karma and sometimes Anna. It's weird. But somehow saying Deathclock, not only does it get the capitalization right, but it gets the spelling correct every single time first try. I'm not upset, I'm just confused. But back to the video. Upon leaving to get reinforcements, I gained another level up, but being as the game still rendered me near enemies, I used a console command to do the level up anyway to stay within the challenge guidelines. But before we could let the bad guys throw their Deathclock concert, I had to go tell the head lady in charge in Bruma that I would need her guards for the upcoming battle. She gave me Bird and his goon squad, and after downing enough skooma to kill a man, I ran all the way back to Sean Bean and told him we were ready for the final assault. I ran down to the battlefield and began intimidating the men by running back and forth wildly, while we waited on Sean Bean and Joffrey to roll up ever so slowly. He gave his Fellowship of the Ring speech, and then the Oblivion gates began to spawn. Now, just for the record, even though it doesn't actually apply to this video, apparently Martin Septim can actually die during this mission. This isn't anything to worry about because on max difficulty he has a knife from Todd Howard himself, but I just thought it was interesting. The battle consisted of people running around, slashing wildly, and fireballs. Lots of fireballs. I drank invisibility potions and ran around doing my best to contribute. Eventually, the big bad Major Oblivion Gate himself spawned, and it was up to me to go in and shut it down. Now, to be fair, I've only gotten to this point twice, so a lot of this attempt was me running around lost trying to remember where or what to do. I did eventually make it to the final door, only to be told that I didn't have any lockpicks to open the door. So I reloaded to save, ran to the Imperial City, then did a lap around the entire place looking for one Shady Sam.
You need something?
He sells 30 lockpicks at a time, and that was all I needed. We re-queued up for the battle, refought the scamps, and I quickly sped through the Oblivion Gate, trying to make my way back after realizing where I was supposed to go. I picked open the door and closed down the Oblivion Gate. I was teleported just outside as Sean Bean and the homies were putting down the last of the Daedra, and he told me that he finally had everything to get me into the pocket dimension. We regrouped at his house, he casted a magic chanting spell, and just like that, I was in paradise. Paradise wasn't that bad. I dosed up on skooma and ran until I came to a Daedra. I didn't pay it any attention as to what it said, and he promptly cut me down for it. I tried again, and this time actually listened to what the poor man was saying. He told me that if I let out some entity in a nearby cave, he would let me into the VIP lounge. I ran to the cave, kicked out a couple of sticks, and watched as a giant ogre attack some poor guy. I ran back to the Daedra, and sure enough, he gave me these sweet bracelets that allowed me access into the next area. Continuing into the next room, I was greeted by a man who wanted to remain anonymous as he covered his face with an entire wall. He told me that he actually wanted to kill Mankar Cameron as well, because the slam poetry that he performed earlier was actually this guy's. But before he could help me, I'd have to play along to give him an alibi to be able to get in close. That involved me getting into a human-sized cage and being lowered into lava. Luckily for me, some poor dude next to me was lowered into lava to sound like it was me. My face got burnt, and I ran straight for the exit before any other crazy shenanigans could take place. I made it back into paradise, and I could see the end before me. Just past a bunch of hooded weirdos standing outside, Mankar Cameron was in the building in front of me. The end was in sight. But I was not prepared for the tomfoolery that would take place in that next room. See, Mankar Cameron is a spellcaster. No big surprise there. But he can also summon Daedra to defend him. Neither Mankar nor his Daedra summon can be affected by Frenzy. The other two people can, but for some reason they would attack his summon first instead of him. The other issue with this fight was even while I would be invisible, the game wouldn't actually register me drinking the potion straight away, which meant that Mankar or any of the other people in the room could still attack me as if they could see me. This led to over an hour of trying to get these other two people to kill Mankar while staying alive. And I must have saved so many times that I think I have more saves in this one room than the rest of the game. I did make some progress with eventually getting one of the other enemies to attack Mankar pretty reliably, except for the fact that this man had a heal that would put him up to so much health remaining that it almost rendered the fight useless. So naturally I had to come up with another solution. I reloaded a save outside the door, made a save in front of the said door, and then teleported all the way back to town and bought Hush and Mute. Two spells that could cancel out spellcasting and hopefully give me the win over this guy. Only issue is, I couldn't cast them because my illusion spell was too low, and I didn't have enough magicka. So I spent the next 40 minutes getting my illusion to get high enough to cast this one spell. Once I had the items, I load warped back to Mankar Cameron, only to find that sometimes when you load warp, non-essential enemies don't spawn, which meant that it was only Mankar and his Daedric summon, which meant I stood no chance of fighting him, which meant I would have to run through paradise all over again. If it meant I could finally beat the game, it's a small sacrifice I was willing to make. I retraced my steps through paradise and eventually ended up back at Mankar Cameron, came into the final room and spawned in a bunch of potions just in case things went south. I tried so hard to get Mankar's chariot to attack him, but for some reason the AI just did not want to cooperate. I took another 30 minutes before Mankar summoned a flame atronach that things started looking up. All it took was one fireball before the entire room descended into madness. Child attacking father, dying, being reborn, and doing it all over again. One of the children held a greatsword that does stupid damage, and Mankar wasn't able to heal fast enough through it, and with a lot of whacking, Raven Cameron killed Mankar, which killed them both, which then let me loot my necklace of friendship and peace out of paradise. However, there was one small issue. Apparently when you cast Hush on a spellcaster to negate the spellcasting, it's considered an attack, which means even though it didn't do any damage, it still counted in the book as an assault. So when I made it back to Cyrodiil, I had 2 assaults to my name, and I couldn't allow that. So to beat the challenge, I reloaded a save and convinced Raven Cameron to kill his dad one more time to allow me to loot my friendship necklace again and leave forever. No assaults, no murders, no bad marks on my permanent record. Once free of Paradise, I reunited with Boromir, and he told me that we had to go to the Imperial City to end the game. We went to a main council chamber, I waited around like a madman, and Daedra attacked, but they couldn't hit what they couldn't see, so I downed an invisibility potion and ran straight past Sukuna himself to the final room. I waited again for Boromir to appear, gave my friendship necklace, and watched him turn into the manifestation of all the struggles I had with this run, and end the Jujutsu Kaisen fandom all in one go. A statue is all that was left to remind us of all the sacrifices along the way, and with that, I beat Oblivion without killing anyone or anything.
We have sealed the gates of Oblivion.
Hands down, one of the wackiest, most frustrating, but rewarding runs I think I've ever done. I learned tons of new techniques to implement in future videos, and albeit sometimes the challenge felt impossible, but it was a huge relief to get it done. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for sticking around as you make making these videos feel worthwhile. And if you want, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for any future content. If you have a suggestion for any other challenge run, be sure to let me know down in the comments because I read them all. I've been Chris from Crisis Gaming. You're all great, and I'll see you on the next one.